Let's talk about your stuff. Your phone, the shirt you're wearing right now. Have you ever actually flipped over the tag to see where it was made? Today, we're going to go on a journey to figure out what made in Canada even means anymore, and why the story behind all your things is a way bigger deal than you might think. So, be honest. Do you ever check the label on your clothes? My guess is it probably says something other than Canada. And that one little fact, well, it's at the very heart of a massive shift in our country's whole economy. It really brings up a big question. Should we care about buying Canadian-made stuff? That's what we're going to try and figure out. A huge piece of this puzzle comes down to one single word: outsourcing. Basically, it's when a company decides to move part of its operation, like a whole factory, to another country. Why? Well, it's usually to find cheaper labor and sometimes to deal with fewer rules. This one idea, it explains so much about what's happened to manufacturing in Canada over the last few decades. Okay, so to really get our heads around all this, we're going to break it down into four parts. First, we'll zoom out and look at the big picture of Canada's economy. Then, we'll get into why factories pop up in certain places to begin with. After that, we'll tackle the massive global shakeup that changed everything. And finally, we'll look ahead. What's the next chapter for Made in Canada? All right, let's jump into section one, the big picture. Before we can really talk about manufacturing, we need to see where it fits in the grand scheme of things. It turns out you can pretty much sort every single job in Canada into one of three big buckets. So bucket number one is the primary industry. This is all about taking stuff directly from the earth. We're talking about farming, logging in a forest, mining for diamonds, or fishing out on the ocean. It's the starting point for, well, pretty much everything. Next up is the secondary industry. Now, this is where manufacturing lives. These are the jobs that take all those raw materials from the first bucket and turn them into finished goods. So taking trees and making furniture, or taking steel and building a car. This is the making stuff sector. And finally, we have the tertiary industry, which is, basically everything else. This whole sector doesn't make a physical thing. It provides a service. We're talking teachers, doctors, the person who sold you your lunch, and even the people who code the apps on your phone. This is the service economy. Now, check this out. You might think that manufacturing, making stuff, is the biggest part of our economy. And while it's super important, it's not even close. The service sector, that tertiary bucket, makes up a whopping 70% of all jobs in Canada. Manufacturing is sitting at about 20%, and resource jobs are around 10%. This is a huge change from what our economy looked like just a generation ago. And it's something to think about, because chances are your future job is somewhere in that big 70% slice. Let's move on to section two. You've heard that phrase, location, 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 when it comes to buying a house, right? Well, it's just as crucial, if not more, for building a factory. Why does a company choose one town over another for a multi-million-dollar plant? Trust me, it's not random. There's a whole checklist they go through. And here's that checklist. A company has to ask itself a bunch of questions. Are we close to the people who buy our stuff? Can we easily get the raw materials we need? Is there enough water and a reliable power grid? Can we find enough skilled workers? How are we going to ship our final product? And what are the local politics like? Are there any government freebies on the table? All of these things have to line up just right. This map of highways really brings those factors to life. Think about the car industry in Ontario. A lot of plants use something called just-in-time delivery. That means car parts arrive at the factory exactly when they're needed on the assembly line, not a moment sooner. If a truck full of bumpers gets stuck in traffic, the whole line can shut down, costing thousands of dollars a minute. That's why being right next to a major highway network is an absolute deal breaker. And that brings us to one of the thorniest political questions: government money or subsidies? On one side, you have people saying, no way, these are huge, profitable companies. They don't need our tax dollars. They call it corporate welfare. But the other side says, look, we don't have a choice. We're competing against places in the US and Mexico that are offering huge subsidies. If we don't play the game, we could lose thousands and thousands of jobs. As you can see, there is no easy answer here. Okay, moving on to section three, the global shakeup. So we know why factories open, but what about the flip side? Why do plants that have been the heart of a community for generations just disappear? A lot of the time, the reasons are way bigger than just that one company. To really get this, let's look at the story of one Canadian town, Smiths Falls, Ontario. For over 100 years, it was home to a huge farm equipment company. When it closed, it was a massive blow. But then,
Hershey came to town, and Smiths Falls became the chocolate capital of Ontario. Imagine that. But in 2008, that plant closed down and production moved to Mexico. And then the very next year, another huge employer shut its doors. This timeline shows you just how fragile a town's identity can be when it's tied to these big economic shifts.
So what's the giant force driving this kind of change? Well, a huge part of the answer is globalization. It's this idea that companies don't just think locally anymore. They operate on a world stage. They're always looking for the cheapest place to make things and the biggest markets to sell them in. It connects us all, for sure, but it also creates this intense worldwide competition for jobs in towns like Smith Falls.
Now, one of the main engines of globalization is free trade. But to get free trade, you first have to understand what it replaced: tariffs. And this table explains it perfectly. Let's say Canadian-made jeans cost $60. Without a tariff, imported jeans might be cheaper, say $50. You'd probably buy those. But if the government slaps a $20 tax, a tariff, on those imported jeans, they now cost $70. All of a sudden, the Canadian pair is the better deal. So tariffs protect local jobs, but getting rid of them means shoppers like you save money. It's a classic trade-off. And this graph, this is what that global competition actually looks like. It shows the explosion of imports from China into Canada starting in the 90s. The rise of these manufacturing giants, especially in Asia, just completely changed the game. It created a level of competition that, frankly, most Canadian factories had never, ever seen before. But it isn't just about direct competition. There's this other kind of weird phenomenon called Dutch disease. Here's how it works. Canada is super rich in natural resources, like oil. When we sell tons of oil to other countries, the demand for the Canadian dollar goes way up, making our dollar more valuable. That sounds great, right? Well, maybe not. A high dollar makes our manufactured goods, like cars or airplanes, way more expensive for other countries to buy from us. So weirdly enough, our success in one area can actually hurt our success in another. So, with all these massive challenges, what does the future even hold? Is it all doom and gloom? Well, let's get to our final section, the next chapter for Made in Canada. See, the future probably isn't about Canada competing to have the cheapest t-shirts. Instead, it's about shifting to what we call knowledge-based industries. This means focusing on making things that require super smart, highly skilled, well-educated workers. Think aerospace, new medicines, high-tech robotics. It's all about being smarter, not just cheaper. This all ties into a big economic idea called comparative advantage. But honestly, it's just like a group project in school, right? You don't make the person who's amazing at art do all the math, and you don't make the math whiz design the poster. Everyone does the part they're best at, and the whole project is better for it. The idea here is that Canada should focus on what it does best on the world stage. And you know what? We're already seeing this happen. It's about finding your niche. A perfect example is Manitoba Mucklucks. They took unique, traditional Aboriginal designs, combined it with a smart global business plan, and now they sell their stuff all over the world. They've built a brand that people want because it's Canadian. It proves you don't have to be the biggest factory to win. You can be unique and amazing. So the next time you look at a label, you'll know there's a huge story behind it. Canada's economy is changing, for sure. The old world of giant factories is evolving into something new, specialized, high-tech, and based on knowledge. So the question isn't just where is this made anymore, it's what will Canada make next? And as you start thinking about your own future, the most important question of all is what role will you play in it?